here with money, and
That's mine.
I have to tell you folks, with politicians around here leaving something like at a collection basket, it's a very dangerous action. I thank you very much for being here, and if liberals are dismayed and annoyed in November, it's going to be because you have taken the government back in your control. If you are satisfied with the way things are going on with Washington, I advise you to sleep for the next 10 or 15 minutes because I'm not. We have a special election on a Saturday, April 26th. I've been elected 12 consecutive terms. I won a 4-way primary against an establishment candidate. I've represented roughly 1/3 of the 10th congressional district in my time in Richmond. Barack Obama won my seat, my district, by a little more than 11%. I worked in Congress for 6 years. I became exceptionally familiar with the rules of the House of Representatives. I accompanied Bob Doran on the floor of the House of Representatives. I worked for Senator Jeremiah Denton and assisted him in the passage of Title 20 of the Public Health Service Act, which set up the abstinence programs. I was staff director of the Senate subcommittee. Now, keep in mind, everybody makes promises. I also want to show you what I have delivered. When you see those two, you decide how to vote. Everybody who's running opposes Obamacare. Only one person wrote a law that Ken Cuccinelli used to sue Barack Obama. That's Bob Marshall. I have introduced. Obama is compelling people to violate their conscience, to buy abortion pills or whatever this is, and birth control for minors. That's a First Amendment violation of freedom of conscience. The First Amendment was there, and Madison wrote it to protect conscience. I put in bills 2 years in a row now to say you cannot be compelled to do this. How did I do it? I went to a bona fide classical liberal who teaches law at the University of Virginia, Doug Laycock, who beat the Obama administration in a lawsuit. And I went to a classical conservative at Catholic University. I got the bills matched. The bill would survive constitutional scrutiny. The only thing it didn't survive was the unwillingness of the Republican leadership in Richmond to do something about it. Everybody says they're not going to raise your taxes. I've had plenty of opportunities to raise your taxes. I've never done it once. As a matter of fact, I sued the Democrat governor, the Republican speaker, and the Republican attorney general who got together to set up a committee to pick your pocket, not themselves, because they didn't want to do it themselves, they were too gutless to do it, but they set up an unelected authority to do it. Now, I reminded my colleagues that this was 1776, there'd be people pointing muskets at them. It wasn't 1776, so I had to raise $100,000 of my own, and I went to court. And I beat them 7-0 in the Virginia Supreme Court. Taxation without representation is still illegal in Virginia because I sued, you won. All Republicans say they oppose crony capitalism. I don't doubt that. But in 1994, when Governor Allen wanted you to pay $163 million to build an entrance to a theme park in Haymarket, in my district now, mind you, I voted no. Everybody said, all the businesses said, this is political suicide. I said, no, it's not. I said, first, I think they're going to back out of this. I said, number two, why would you give $163 million in tax money to a bunch of Democrats from Hollywood? VDOT was never going to build that interchange. It's not a case of building something now that we're going to build in the future. Kings Dominion built their interchange. Busch Gardens built their interchange. And when they passed out this money for economic development, Betty's Beauty Parlor doesn't get a dime. Pete's Towing Service doesn't get any money. But Northrop Grumman, they'll get all kinds of money. I said no. Disney went away. Everybody says they support transparency. I didn't mind if they came, just pay their own freight. Everybody says they support transparency, but what are you willing to do to defend the right of your citizens to know? I'll tell you what I did. When Bill Howe, the Republican speaker, pressured everybody into supporting a rules change to make it virtually impossible for you to know what's going on in subcommittee, I was the only Republican to vote no. You know what I got for that, my reward? I lost 16 years of seniority. I was stripped from 2 subcommittee chairmanships. Prior to that, I was vice chairman of the subcommittee. And they threatened to take me out of the Republican caucus. I said, go ahead and make my day, because you will be stupid enough to make me a martyr. They rethought that one, and they didn't do that. But they stripped me of all this. I'll do it again. I work for you. I don't work for a clique in Richmond. I'm not going to work for a clique in Washington. I will defend, without compromise, the right to life. Everybody says they're pro-life. What are you willing to do with it? Well, in 1976, I had previously been a member of a conservative group called Young Americans for Freedom. One of the members was Bob Bauman, a member of the House of Representatives. I went up to Bob Bauman with the Freedom of Information Act a friend of mine got. I pulled him off the floor of the House and I said, look, we have got to get an amendment on an appropriations bill. The Democrats are killing all these things in committee. And I said, this is what I would suggest. There was 273 or 87,000 abortions, babies killed, tax money. I said, that's horrible. Let's get a vote on it. Gave it to him, explained how the amendment should be drawn up. He said, I've got a guy that I think might be interested in this. I didn't know who it was. But 3 weeks later, I heard an amendment passed on the HEW appropriation bill. It was Henry Hyde, a freshman congressman from Illinois. That started the Hyde Amendment. That was my contribution. I was not working for a member of Congress. I just went up and did that. When my wife and I, who's back here, by the way, we were working for Congressman Bob Dornan. I devised 3 amendments for him to cut off abortions in the military, the District of Columbia, and foreign aid. I also devised an amendment to protect private schools from having to prove that they were innocent of racial discrimination. Missouri Synod Lutheran schools were being gone after by the IRS. Missouri was represented at that time by Tom Eagleton, the guy that, McGovern, who when he said, I've got 110% confidence in Eagleton, I knew he was, up for toast at that point at the Democrat convention, which I watched, by the way, and I concluded, not only was I not a Democrat anymore, I'm not on the same planet with these people. So Ronald Reagan was the first Republican I ever voted for or worked for. I devised an amendment that made the IRS prove these private schools guilty of racial discrimination if they wanted to yank their tax status. That is still law. I will not back down from fights with the Obama administration. I've overridden governors at least 3 times and maybe 4. In 2012, I introduced a bill based on what I saw to be a very horrifying circumstance. The National Defense Authorization Act, passed in December of 2011, contained a provision that allowed the president, any president, and given to this president, is unbelievably imprudent. The ability to take you off the streets, not to charge you with anything, not to give you counsel, and to detain you indefinitely. This is like the, Stasi in East Germany. No difference. Well, we have to protect ourselves from terrorists. We have to protect ourselves from people who wreck our Constitution in the name of protecting ourselves from terrorists. I had to fight this thing, and it was about 20 minutes till 12, the day that the governor had to figure out, was he going to sign the bill or amend it? And his people were trying to say he wouldn't do this. I said, let me tell you what, I've overridden governors 3 times. Bob McDonald can be number 4. Make your mind up. He called me back 3 minutes later at about 15 of 12, and they said, we'll accept the amendment. I said, okay, we won. My chief opposition to this was Barbara Comstock. She got a letter from Michael Chertoff and Ed Meese, hoping that the governor would kill the bill. Well, he didn't kill the bill. I've introduced legislation this year to push determination government policy back to the states. I've introduced bills to say that the states, depending upon best practices of industry, can form compacts for the exploitation, mining, and distribution of coal, rather than EPA deciding this. I also did it for natural gas and for oil. I presently am suing the University of Virginia because Michael Mann worked there. He had emails. He didn't disclose all these things. I did a FOIA to the UVA, and they said they didn't have any of his materials on hand. Ken Cuccinelli had a case. He lost, but something came out in the trial which indicated they did have this. I wrote back and said, wait a minute, you said you didn't have this. I got the law changed to double the penalty for bureaucrats who refused to tell us this. I'm in court right now. The Virginia Supreme Court should have decided this in February. They're going to probably decide this sometime just before the election in April. I'm not going to let people who work for the government hide what they do from you. You pay their salary. They should be accountable to you. You should be able to see what they're doing. This is not proprietary information. This isn't disciplinary activities. This is something you have a right to do. I will defend your right to defend your life. Every election, I've either been endorsed by the NRA, the GOA, or VCDL. I just don't vote right. I introduce bills. I am very aggressive. I have put amendments on the budget to say no board of visitors can implement a policy to prevent a professor from having a concealed carry on campus. If there had been professors at Virginia Tech who had concealed carry, I don't think you'd have had 34 dead students. You need to have people who can defend themselves and defend their students, and I know those professors would have done that. I had a bunch of guards from the school come in on a bill version of this I had, and they said, you need to leave law enforcement to the professionals. I said, you know what? We left it to the professionals, and there's 34 families without children now. The people are the professionals. They are the citizens. They have these rights, and they don't have to delegate everything out to somebody else. I will defend your right to privacy against an invasive government. I introduced a study this year, it didn't pass, but I introduced it to get people talking about what states can do to block this invasion of our Fourth Amendment rights. Hamilton, the biggest exponent of executive power, indicated that states will be jealous guardians of the rights of citizens. Against whom? Space aliens? No, the federal government.
Well, isn't that the same
It is
thing?
our obligation. I might have had space aliens. It is our obligation as legislators to protect you from the predators in Washington when they get out of line. What I did get passed this year was a bill, and I got John Birchers and ACLU and everybody in between endorsing this bill. Says if state police or local police are going to come after you, there's a GPS in here to track you, or in an iPad, they've got to have a warrant. They simply cannot do these search and destroy missions on anybody they want to. I have not, let me go into this. Judicial activism. I wrote the amendment that you all approved in 2006. I started planning for this in 2003 with the Lawrence v. Texas decision, and I decided at that point that I would make the human rights campaign, the homosexual activists, just work for every bit of what they call progress. So I got a bill passed over Mark Warner's objection that says we're not recognizing out-of-state civil unions. That was the predicate for passing the amendment. It passed once in 2005. It passed a second time in 2006. You voted for it. When this judge, who gets paid $180,000 a year, decided that words from the Declaration of Independence are in fact words from the Constitution, I'm sorry, she needs to get off the bench. I am filing a professional conduct violation against her. I have filed a bar complaint against Mark Herring, and I'm not going to let him get away with what he thinks is the practice of law. Now let me just close very briefly. My colleague and I do have some differences. My colleague decides she will vote for a Medicaid expansion if it can be reformed. Folks, the GAO has been looking at Medicaid since it passed in 1965. It can't be reformed. I'm going to vote no. I don't care if they say they've got it reformed. I'm not going to vote for it. She also voted for a very activist judge, somebody who defied the Uniform Code of Military Justice when you had the don't ask, don't tell. She voted for him twice to become a member of the judiciary. This guy thinks he's married to a man. I had to question, how can he take an oath uphold the Virginia Constitution when the Constitution says you can't do what in fact you're doing in your life? My colleague also took $99,000 from people who want to wreck family marriage in Virginia. $18,700 from Ted Olson, who took the case down in Norfolk, and $80,000, $30,000 of which from a guy named Paul Singer, who's a billionaire hedge fund owner, whose son thinks he married a man. Look, you want to do this, I mean, you've got your own fantasies. I'm not into persecution. God knows your heart, I don't. But we have to look at actions and consequences. And the consequences of saying two guys can marry each other are so vast and so far-reaching, I can't go into them right now. No church will have a tax-exempt status. You will not have a school sex ed program that you won't want anybody to go to, much less a 6 or 7-year-old. I mean, I don't want to get into that, even if this is an adult audience. So, folks, there are consequences for all this. I am very candid. I put my cell phone on the internet. If you want to reach me, you know how to reach me. I know the rules of the House. I don't mind enforcing them. I get in fights because I'm serious about what I believe. I've been critical of Boehner in the paper. I've been respectful, but I've been critical. How do you get a balanced budget? The question came from over here. You offer an amendment. This is what happens. I used to do these amendments all the time, limitation amendments for Congressman Bob Dorner. Tip O'Neill decided to change the amount of people you needed to get it from 20 to 25. Notwithstanding the Constitution says you need 20, doesn't matter what's the Constitution among friends. We were still able to overcome him on that. Then they changed the rule, so if you offer a limitation amendment, that is, you can't spend money for X, you can't spend money for abortion, you can't spend money for green balloons. What the majority does is they make a motion for the committee of the whole to rise, which means they report the bill back to the House of Representatives. To offer a limitation amendment now, you have to defeat the motion to rise. So how would I get a vote? I'd say, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Virginia, I have an amendment at the desk, please read it. He reads the amendment. The amendment says, notwithstanding any other appropriation by law, we will fund this agency at the amount of funding that we did 4 years ago, because current revenues equal current expenditures 4 years ago. Now, will I win? I don't know. But am I going to offer this amendment? Yeah. And the vote on the motion to rise. If you defeat the motion to rise, it means you probably want to vote on my motion to limit the spending. I may lose the outcome, but I'll be damned if I won't get a vote on this thing. That's how you change it. You force everybody on record. Remember, it says in the New Testament, evil loves the darkness. You have got to force these things. It's going to make you unpopular with the leadership. Who cares? I mean, really, I work for you, not Mr. Boehner and not Mr. Cantor. I also tried to get Mr. Cantor to sue on the origination clause. Since the decision came down with Roberts claiming that it was a tax, immediately Boehner should have said, oh, if it's a tax, the bill that came over was amended by the Senate. The bill that came over from the Senate was not a revenue measure, it was a tax credit that Charlie Rangel put in. Charlie Rangel put this in to say, if you're in the Foreign Service or in the military and your job description changed, you have to move, you get a tax credit. That's not a revenue bill, folks. I've got decisions of the Supreme Court on that. The only people who have standing to sue is not the president, it's not a senator from Virginia, it's not Doty, it's not Bob Marshall, it's a member of the House of Representatives, because standing rules say you have to be directly affected. I tried to get, Cantor to do this. I could not do it. Now, if I was down there, I'd be yelling at Mr. Cantor, do these 1-minute speeches at the night, say, everybody's on this suit right here, except the leadership. Why are you not on it? There is a suit right now. There are about 30 members of Congress on it, but this should have been done by Boehner and by Cantor, and to kick back. Instead, they had this little, carnival of 40 votes. You're not serious when you're not using the weapons that will get you a victory. So I'll stop right now.
Some specific questions.
Okay.
How about that?
All right. Well, I answer mine. Okay.
Hey, Delegate Marshall, you look like you have a well-known cause for bucking the system. Our current retiring congressman has been a longtime member of the Main Street Republicans, a well-known moderate group with the likes of Tom Davis and Bill Bowling, putting a lot of money in to squelch the voice of the Tea Party. I'm just wondering, when you get to Congress, who are you going to caucus with? Will you join the Main Street Republicans, or will you caucus with people like Louis Gohmert and Trey Gowdy?
Well, I hope it'll be like Jesus. I talk to prostitutes and lawyers. That doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them, but I'll talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere, for anything.
Is there a difference?
Prostitutes and lawyers? I don't know which gets paid higher, but
Delegate Marshall, I'm sure you probably already thought about this, but haven't you been endorsed by just about every other member of the House of Delegates to get rid of you?
this is a bittersweet thing for them. I am the biggest pain in the, well, you can figure out where, in Richmond, because I don't go along to get along. I had the first introduction to that. I was there about 3 years, and I had an amendment, a bill, which said we're going to have parental notice for abortion. And Bill Howell come up to me and says, Bob, if you want to get along around here, you're going to go along. I said, Bill, let me tell you one thing. If it's talking about building a road 100 feet here or 400 feet over here, I can make those adjustments. I didn't make the moral rules of the universe. I can't do that. What I can do, I can more narrowly focus it. You know, the civil rights movement started down in Birmingham. What was it about? Sitting on the bus. They had other grievances about lunch counters in schools, but it was about sitting on the bus. If you take your principle and apply it 100% in a very narrow area and never give up on the principle, that's how to proceed. That's how to avoid being caught in, you're contradicting yourself. I've never contradicted myself because what I've done, if you follow principles and you take first principles and use your actions and based on them, you don't have to think, what did I do last week on this? You go and you just apply it very narrowly. So yes, they would be bittersweet. They'd like to get rid of me, but then they'd say, God, what can you do in Congress?
You said something about petition to impeach Herring.
I don't
What
want to.
hurt is one going about?
Well, there is a petition, but let me tell you, I hope the Baptists don't take offense on this, but I watched my father play poker all night when I was 5 years old. And they didn't put all their cards on the table. You don't want to expose all the tactics, what you're going to do. But Mark Harrington have a rough time practicing law in this state once I get through with him.
Any other questions, sir?
You heard my other questions, and I'll pass on those. I think there are 5 candidates that are running for this seat.
6.
6. My math's not too good.
That's all right.
One of them, I think, is a gentleman named Howard Lynn.
Yes.
In a respectful way, because I think it can be respectful. Where do you and he differ, or is it simply a personality situation, or the fact that you held the office, somebody else did not, i.e. the delegate seat? I'm just curious on your feedback. If you decline the answer, I can respect that, which is fine.
I don't talk about personalities. I talk about what I've done. You don't have to be convinced that when if I get to Washington, I'm going to follow through on this, because I've done it in Richmond against odds that nobody wants to deal with. So it's just, you want to bet on this horse, you bet on the horse that you know is going to run a certain way. Now, a new one may run better, but if you want a sure bet at a time of crisis, you pick somebody who has performed, has promised, has followed through, and has not wavered. Look, when I did the marriage amendment, I had my phones cut. I had people drive in front of my house real slow. I had to get the state police to go after some guy and tell him, you make any more phone calls like that, you're not going to make phone calls for a year. And recently, I had to get the local police after somebody in Prince William County. I'm not changing on marriage because I didn't make the rules on marriage.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Nobody backs me down.
One more question. I guess it's gonna be you, Jerry.
Any other questions? Because I don't really have a question. I've got a good Marshall.
And my wife's here to watch.
My wife isn't here. She sends her regards. When we left Fairfax County about a year ago, we were in the house right across the street from Bob Dornan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yes.
We talked to you about it before. Some years later, as a scientist, I got involved in some junk science that EPA had funded out in Loudoun County. A very clever attorney and I got together to try to put something in to then Attorney General Cuccinelli's office to get an opinion on an issue which we thought might really make a difference in other counties. What we learned was that the law doesn't allow regular old citizens to put these kinds of issues in before the Attorney General. But what we did was we shopped around and found someone who had the standing to put such an issue before the Attorney General, and it was Delegate Marshall. And he did a terrific job for us, got answers to questions that we couldn't get otherwise. And I'll always appreciate that.
Well, I thank you very much, and listen, now that you're up here, you can ask Mark these questions.
Yeah.
And Mark
knows, he hears a lot.
Listen, you all sent the right person to Richmond.
I'm gonna have Mark stand up and I'm gonna tell everybody that this is our delegate now from the 29th district. please stand up, Mark. Dr. Mark Berg, retired Dr. Mark Berg, for those who get upset about that. And he's newly elected this past fall in our elections, and we're very glad to have someone in Richmond here that's going to be fighting for our liberties.
I just want to tell you two things. Mark Berg is voting for me, and you sent the right guy to Richmond because he's making the right enemies.